Welcome back. This will be our first section, an advanced introduction to Flask. In this section, we are going to have a brief refresher on the Flask API, and we're going to set up our project for the course. In this video titled A High-Level Reintroduction into Flask, we are going to quickly go over the basics of Flask's API to act as a refresher for those that need it. We will also create a basic application that all of the following sections will build off of. First, we will need a project folder. You can call your folder anything, but I will call it WFDB. Now open your code editor to this folder and create a file called app.py, which will hold our application object and our routes for now. The app.py file now contains the smallest amount of code necessary for a Flask app to run. As you can see, the app object is created from a Flask object, which will hold all our routes and handle the application logic. Also, the home function is turned into a Flask route through the app.route decoder. And at the bottom, we can check if the file is being called from a Python process and not just imported. If that's true, we run the server. Let's install the Flask package and test our basic app. Open your preferred command line interface and run pip3 install Flask. Then run app.py file with Python. If we go to the default Flask port 5000 on localhost, we can see Hello World message in our browser. Nice! Now, in order to speed up our development and debugging time, we are going to install our first Flask extension, Flask script, and IPython. IPython is a custom Python REPL that comes with a lot of extra features, like tab completion and better documentation printing. You can use it exactly like the normal Python REPL and nothing will change, but the extra features are there if you want to use them. Flask script is a Flask extension that allows you to define functions which can be run from the command line that run inside your app's application context. Flask's application context is basically an easy way for Flask to give extensions access to the application object to modify it without explicitly passing references around. The current request object to the Flask app and all Flask extensions are held on the application context. So if you wish to use either, which we will in the upcoming sections, we need our code to work inside of it. That's why we need Flask script. The main uses for Flask script are running the server and debugging through its shell interface, which we will see more of in the next section. So, let's go back to the terminal and close the server. Then use pip3 to install Flask script and IPython. Now we need a manage.py file that will hold our Flask script commands. We will start off with two basic commands, one to run the server and one to create a Python REPL that is working inside of our application context. From now on, we will use the command python3 manage.py run server to run the server. Next, we need to add some basic Jinja templates to our application. By default, Flask looks for templates in a folder named Templates, but this can be overridden when instantiating the Flask object. Let's create a Templates folder in our project folder with a file called base.html and another called index.html. As this is not a design-oriented course, we will use Bootstrap to handle our site's design. If you have never used Bootstrap before, it is a drop-in CSS framework that gives many features like grid system and default typography. We will need to download Bootstrap to our project. But first, we will create the HTML. Index.html will inherit from base.html, and for now, it will just contain a simple Hello World message. To have our app render out our templates, we will need the render_template function from Flask. Replace the Hello World line with this line. Next, we will need to download Bootstrap. At the time of recording this video, the latest Bootstrap version is 3.3.6. However, for this course we are going to be using version 4, which is still in alpha stage. But right now, there is no option to download compiled Bootstrap. Don't worry though, it is not difficult to compile Bootstrap from the source. However, since our focus is on Flask, let's not waste a lot of time compiling Bootstrap. I've already done that, and we're going to download compiled Bootstrap 4 from the course GitHub page at https://github.com/laweek/mastering_flask. Hit the Download Zip button to get a zip file of the repo we need. Unzip the file, rename the Bootstrap folder to Static, and move it to your project directory. You may recall that the static folder is where Flask looks for things like CSS files and JS files. As a side note, you can change the default name for this folder when instantiating the Flask object. Now all the links that we wrote in our HTML should resolve. So let's go to the terminal and start the server, then go to the browser. Excellent! We see that Flask is rendering our templates correctly. So in this video, we created a Flask app with one route. It renders a template that inherits from a base template and pulls files from our static folder. In the next video, we will go over a very popular Python tool, virtualenv, and why it's important for all Python projects.